welcome. It's so loud. Welcome to our second Visiting Artist lecture in our Visiting Artist series for spring 2022. It's a huge pleasure tonight to introduce to you Ron Bechet as our visiting artist for the Studio Art Department, and also he's serving as the juror for the Young Contemporaries student exhibition. Ron is the Victor H. Labat Professor of Art in the Department of Art at Xavier University of Louisiana. He's a painter and has exhibited his work nationally and internationally. He's been teaching for 20 years at the college level and holds a BA degree in Fine Arts from the University of New Orleans and an MFA in Painting and Drawing from Yale School of Art at Yale University. In addition, Ron is a former member of the Joan Mitchell Foundation, and he's served on other boards and commissions, such as Imagining America's National Advisory Board. He served as the first director of the Xavier Art Department's Community Arts Partnership Program, as well as in many arts and youth programs in the New Orleans area, both as an advisor and a practitioner. He was the recipient of the New Orleans Mayor's Arts Award in 2006. His work has recently been featured in the Prospect 5 Triennial Exhibition in New Orleans in 2021. And he's currently a board member of the Ogden Museum of Southern Art and the New Orleans Museum of Art. Let's welcome Ron Bechet. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you for having me and listening to me. And I just want to say, too, I really enjoyed having the opportunity to see your work today. It's very impressive. I had a really tough time working with selecting the work for the exhibition. And I wanted to thank Sarah Barbara for inviting me, and I really have enjoyed my visit so far. First of all, let me start by saying I am a native New Orleanian. So I was born and raised in New Orleans, and I spent the majority of my life in New Orleans. Now that I'm an old man, I have been influenced greatly by my experience in New Orleans and growing up in New Orleans. And so with that, I'm not sure how many of you have had the experience of going to the city. So I wanted to pass some things on to you. Yesterday was a big day in the city. It was actually, today is Ash Wednesday. And if you know anything about New Orleans, it's a traditionally French. It was founded by the French, some 300 years ago. Literally, the name of the city of New Orleans should be Bulbancha, which is a Choctaw name that was given to it a long time before the French came. And Bulbancha means the place of many tongues, which means that it was a gathering place long before the French gathered there. And I thought it would be nice to show you something that has meaning for me since this happened yesterday. I'm going to show you this for a second here. If I can move some things out of the way.
Far off the St. Charles Parade Route, before the sun rises on Mardi Gras Day, Treme is awake. The Northside Skull and Bone Gang has been waking up the neighborhood on Mardi Gras Day for more than 200 years now. A proud tradition started by enslaved Africans in 1819 and carried on by Bruce Sunpipe Arms today.
We don't have a set route. We're not a parade, it's a procession. So we just let the spirit guide the day, but we will wake up this neighborhood and the rest of the world to a carnival morning.
The Skull and Bone Gang honor the dead while celebrating how precious life is.
Most of the songs that we sing and chant now are songs that just came to me in dreams, really. We speak out about mortality in general because you only get one life in this form like this, and it's to be respected.
Around the corner, the original Black Seminole baby dolls take to the street.
Oh, we were in tears this morning.
Formed in 2020, this is their first chance to second line on Mardi Gras Day. But even though the group is new, the tradition goes back more than a century.
It's wonderful. This tradition started in 1912. And I always tell everyone that in those times, people of color, we could not participate in Mardi Gras. So we created our own Mardi Gras. So that's where you have the black masking Indians and you have the baby dolls.
Today, you can see baby dolls and black masking Indians on the parade route. But these groups stay in Treme to remember and honor their ancestors that couldn't celebrate Carnival in New Orleans because of the color of their skin.
So I'm honored to be able to keep up the tradition.
New Orleans history, not just in the museum, but in dancing down the street, inviting you to jump in. Sam Winstrom, Eyewitness News.
So this is part of my influence. When we talk about what influenced us to make our art, this is part of what I am influenced by. And let me figure out how to switch this. Start from the beginning. Okay. So this is back in 1979. This is my good friend Ferdinand Bigard, who is a black masking Indian, and on the streets too, these guys, as you heard, march around the city on Mardi Gras Day. And they are quite a wonderful, wonderful experience because it's not only just visual, but it's also celebration of the day. And it's about being able to celebrate your neighborhood, right? And how many of you saw the series that was on TV for a while called Treme? Okay, we got a couple of folks. Well, Treme is one of the oldest neighborhoods, not only in New Orleans, but in the Western Hemisphere. And it's was actually a black neighborhood very early on, and it was populated primarily by free people of color, which is a sort of a strange term, a strange name, and you only find it in the South and particularly in New Orleans. Meant that not all black people were slaves. Some people were actually able to buy their freedom, given their freedom, and in New Orleans it was a common thing because it was French and Spanish for a long period of time, and so being able to do that was on Sunday was important. So we have an area in Treme, just outside of the French Quarter, that's called Congo Square. And in Congo Square is where people who were enslaved were allowed to go and to celebrate only on Sundays, their culture. And so from that, it's surmised that that's where we get jazz and where we get the influences of African, from African to African American. And so that's really important about this. This is who we just saw. This is Sunpai Barnes, who is chief of the Northside Skull and Bones gang. And you heard what he said, so I'm not going to repeat it for you, but this is Big Chief Tootie Montana, who is a really significant black masking Indian. And he's not an Indian, he's African American, but it's said that what they did was to honor those those Native Americans, those indigenous people that actually were able to help Maroons, help those people who were trying to escape slavery. So they pay honor and tribute to them by masking this way on Mardi Gras Day. So this is the only day traditionally that you can actually wear a mask. And so on that one day, this is what they were compelled to do within themselves, to actually pay honor to these people who helped them. And so that's why these black men do that. This is a famous friend of mine, Keith Calhoun, who is a photographer. And you can see down at the caption that this is the Grand Marshal of the Lady Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club. And a Social Aid and Pleasure Club is another unique New Orleans tradition that came about because there were no ways to take care of yourself. So if you got sick or if you died, how would your family do those things that were necessary to literally bring you along or take you to the next life in a proper way? And so what they would do is that they would all get together and they would pool their money, and when someone would pass or when they needed medical assistance or whatever, they would use that money towards the person who needed it. And so these social aid clubs or social aid benevolent societies developed. And so these guys still are in existence today, but in another form. They're called social aid and pleasure clubs, right? But they also provide benevolence to the community now. And they celebrate their community, and on Sundays, they actually have something which we call a second line. Anybody ever heard of a second line before? All right, one person. First line? I'm teasing a little bit. And it's a tradition that comes from the funerary practices. And early on in New Orleans, and still in New Orleans, yellow fever and those kinds of diseases were prevalent because of our location. So a lot of people didn't make it and didn't survive. And so life and death became one of those things that had a very thin line between it. And so the development and the respect for life and death became very important. So we celebrate a whole lot because we know that you may not be here tomorrow, right? And part of the celebration of Mardi Gras is about that too, right? Being French and Spanish and its origins, Catholicism was very important. So you can see that influence on Mardi Gras, et cetera. But you also see a lot of African influence in New Orleans as well. So you can see the stance of this particular gentleman is a very African stance, right? This is actually yesterday. This is a friend of mine who I helped with making his suit. We don't call them costumes, we call them suits. And you can see that this gentleman on the left side is 92 years old. And this is his first time masking as an Indian. And the lady on the right, she's the big queen of the Yellow Pocahontas Mardi Gras Indians. And this is her first time as well, masking as Indian. She usually masks as a baby doll. We actually have Cinnamon Black, who is a baby doll and a Mardi Gras Indian, and she masks as both on Mardi Gras Day. So she goes out first as a baby doll. You saw the baby dolls earlier. And then she goes back, she changes, and she goes back out as a Mardi Gras Indian. So there's a lot of respect for the tradition. This is Daryl Montana, Big Chief of the Yellow Pocahontas, and this is his suit. This is somebody, too, that I have a war wound here from helping him with his suit. These things are elaborate. They take a year to make at least. And there's a famous song called Every Year at Carnival Time, we make a new suit, right? So literally, they don't use them from year to year. Every year, it's a part of a competition somewhat on the street that, you can't come out, as we say, raggedy. You have to come out in a new suit, and you have to also be respectful that, when you see somebody on the street, they actually play a game on the street of almost like a little war game, where that these guys actually participate in Mardi Gras as a gang or a tribe, and they go around the street and they actually have positions, and each position is a position of respect. And so the lowest position on the street is actually wild man, and the wild man is actually the one who makes the way. And then the spy boy is the one who tries to find the other gangs on the street. And so when they find another gang or another tribe, what they do is that they actually play a game, that they try and outflank the chief. So you try and get the spy boy to the chief, and so you outposition the other tribe. And so it's an interesting kind of a thing that they do. And they only wear these suits 3 times, and that's it. So it's an interesting tradition. So how it influences me, this is a piece of mine that was made back in 89. This piece is called Still Rising. And you can see some of the influence of the dance form that you see, which we call second line. And some of it comes out of some of the traditions of dance on the street that was developed from dances in Congo Square that had to do with the kalinda and the bambula, which were developed culturally from the combination of the many people that were brought from Africa into Congo Square. And so some of that is part of what you see here. And I'm going to go back for a minute because I screwed up some of my position. This painting is an early painting as well, actually, when I was in your position. Only one I have left, only slide I have left. Because we had this little thing called Hurricane Katrina that went through my studio. And so there's not a whole lot of things that I have left from that time. But I wanted to show you this one because this one was very interesting to me. I was actually working using photographs back then. And I was actually painting trash. And the trash was actually on the side of the curb, or the banquet, as we say in New Orleans. And I kind of related it to myself. And as someone who is African American and someone who was at the time basically a young man, just basically out of being a teenager, that I felt kind of disrespected and overlooked. And so I felt like this trash was like me, right? It's very beautiful when you see it in this kind of a way. But, people just walk over it, right? And so that's the way I use this as a metaphor for that. So that's where this comes from. This one is a later piece. This one's a little bit after graduate school. And this one is called St. Joe Brick. And you can barely see some of the information in it, but the St. Joe Brick was something that was, okay, I got to keep touching it, I guess, that you see on the streets of New Orleans. It was actually a brick that was indigenous, that was made in the city. And New Orleans, you guys probably are aware of, is alluvial soil, right? The Mississippi River made New Orleans, right? There's no stone, there's no rock, there's nothing like that. It's all, you dig too deep in New Orleans and you're going to hit some water, right? And so it's a very, very fertile area. And I wanted to bring that to bear too. So what I do a lot is I use a lot of metaphor for this. And so I just wanted you to kind of see some of these two before we move on to some of the other work. Bear with me, I'm going to move through these. This is a oil painting on paper that I liked a lot because it talks about this dense environment that I live in. And it's dense because of what happens to the river, and dense also because of the people that make this space. Often you don't see, I don't like to use figures in my work, but I use the information that figures give me, the dance steps, the movement, the actual conversations that I hear in my head from people and so on. So this is what you see in using the landscape elements as a way to kind of communicate through that. So this one, Questions, No Answers, is one that came in 1994 or 95. I'll get them mixed up. But anyway, you can see again the different ways that you experience this painting is something too that I want you to kind of experience things on many different levels. You can't experience anything right now, right? Let me get back to this. You can see the different ways that space is made here, right? There's at least 3 ways that I've made space through this piece. And also, too, you can see the movement of color as well. All those things are part of looking at this idea here. And part of what I'm doing, and part of why I actually find through the years why I make this stuff is for me to have a conversation and a dialogue. And that dialogue primarily takes place with me, right? With those things that I'm trying to figure out, those things that I'm trying to understand about our existence, our reason for being here, and so on. And so these things are part of what I use, these metaphors that you see as a part of my work. So I'm going to move through these kind of quickly. Also, too, I had the pleasure of working in a studio with a sculptor for about 17 years. His name was John Scott, and he and I worked in a studio together, and he made large-scale aluminum, steel, sculpture, and so his way of making space, of course, influenced me. And so in thinking through that, you can see that this piece actually is, and the one before it, actually made in a 3-dimensional space as well, that the other one fit in a corner. This one actually is painted on wood, and the wood is actually bent into the way of an altarpiece. And you can see that there's another little piece in front of it, and there's an actual door inside of it. And so it almost represents sort of a sacred place that goes inside of it. And so the idea of sacred and secular are things too that play in my understanding. What is sacred? What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of the way that I live my life? All of that is something that you kind of see in the way that I play these things out. And throughout my career, I've been working with black and white as well as color. This one happens to be a large-scale black and white. That's something I should tell you as well, right? Scale. This one is about 6 feet by 6 feet. The one before it, Questions, No Answers, is 7 feet by 12 feet. This one. And I felt it important for you to be involved in the piece, that it takes you over, that you're its scale as well. And let me go back to this one. And so you can see, using these landscape elements, have always been kind of important in my life. And around about here, around 2000, I stopped using photographs altogether, and went into thinking about the influence of what I saw, and thinking about memory, and thinking about not only memory, but trying to think through repressed memories as well, and some of those ideas that I'm trying to deal with in terms of understanding my life. Why am I here? Why is it that we do what we do? Why are we made the way we're made? And so that's part of what you see going on in this. This particular piece happened at about 2007. I made this crazy mural that was actually meant to honor the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. I teach at a school that is founded by a saint, St. Catherine Drexel, who formed the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. And so I was asked to make a mural to honor that tradition in a new chapel at Xavier University, where I teach. I decided to, oh, it's there, okay, to use metaphor again. There were quite a number of these women who dedicated their lives to teaching, and they were founded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they decided to work with African Americans in the South and Native Americans in the Southwest, and that was what they dedicated their mission to. And so I decided to think about their work and use this energy of this circle, because their work was circular and cyclical as well. And so I used all of this bright color and intense color, and I have a tendency to do that when I paint anyway, but it was extremely bright. And I used other symbolism as well in the piece that kind of honored them. I used their St. Catherine Drexel's vestment, and in those days what they would do is that women would actually get married to Christ, and so they would actually wear wedding dresses to become, for their ceremony to become a nun. And so she had this beautiful orange blossom design on the front of her wedding gown, and so I used that as well in the painting. And also had painted a rose for each one of the women that served in New Orleans. So there were some 350 of those. And so it was a crazy piece, but anyway, it blew my eyes out, right? I just couldn't see color anymore. So I started working much more in black and white. And I still have a tendency to go there and paint in black and white. I actually draw in black and white. These are actually charcoal on paper. And they're fairly large. This piece is 6.5 feet wide. And so just to give you a scale orientation. This one as well is a fairly large piece. And you can still see those circles. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that symbolism of the circle, of the movement, of the work. And that activity of the making for me is really important. The physicality of it, the process of making is something that I really enjoy. And I still am able to draw a great deal from life. So where I live, I'm able to actually go into a beautiful park that we have, and then also to another state park that's preserved, and where you can actually, go and meet alligators if you want, or owls, and all those kind of things that, make it for me, but not for most people. But so I go out there and I draw a lot, and so that from that, when I go to these, the memory comes back from those experiences, and it's about more the experience than actually thinking about any particular thing, right, or any particular tree or plant or anything like that. It's all about that experience, and the experience that I had, and the experience that I'm thinking about while I'm out there. And so that's what's important about these particular big, large-scale drawings. I'm going to kind of run so that you guys can have a chance to ask questions. This one is a piece called A Love Supreme, and this is about 5 years ago. And I wanted to kind of highlight this one because, and tell you the title of this one, because it's a significant one, because I really started to understand what Coltrane was getting at when he was talking about A Love Supreme. I don't know if any of you guys are kind of young. I don't know if you know that song, okay, by John Coltrane called A Love Supreme. And it had nothing to do with, the sort of things that we think about as a romantic love and, Valentine's Day and all that stuff. It's about, you know, a deeper kind of understanding of oneself and how we are influenced by who we are. We're made who we are by our influences around us and our understanding of something that's greater than us, right? And so I thought that was something that was a breakthrough for me in terms of understanding what that means, what a love supreme really means. And so that's, this piece was monumental for me. This one's called Resurrection, which is another kind of a breakthrough piece for me. Because this is the one where I really found that I really didn't need to have a photograph to work from. I didn't need that actual thing, that the thing was really inside of me, and that it was really important for me to understand that thing through me, rather than trying to imitate what I saw. It was much more important for what I saw to imitate, that I was looking at and imitating before, to actually influence me, and I then am able to then translate that into my thoughts and my understanding and the deep feeling that I hope that I see and I get from those experiences that I showed you earlier of the second line, and because that's what happens. You really, really are taken over by a spirit, you know, by an understanding. I'm not talking about anything that, you know, might be sort of religious in nature, but there's a spirit that comes over you that is community-oriented. It's part of your existence. It's part of understanding who you are. And so that's what I'm hoping that I'm getting when I do these. And so when I say this idea of spirit, that's what I'm referring to. This one's a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, I kind of got something out of sequence earlier. But just to give you an idea of still how these rotations, these spheres are part of what I'm doing now. These two, just to give you some idea of, I have worked mostly flat, but I've also worked sculpturally. And these are actually paintings, but they're paintings that on constructions that I made. And if you notice some of the, and they're not so literal as what I'm hoping that you don't get from what I'm about to say. If you notice the crown of the big chief, right? You can see that there's somewhat of that sort of homage to that understanding of the big chief, right? Of the crown. The crown is the headpiece, the big headdress that they wear, right? And that's part of this. But you can also see a bunch of layers of different things. Not only do you have to see it from one side, but you have to go around it, right? You have to see it from three sides. And being able to draw you into that experience, I'm hoping also that, you know, I'm getting you to think about an experience that makes you understand yourself more fully in terms of not only just using the illusion or the illusion, but also, too, the actual physical experience of movement. So that's part of it. These are two more that from that series that are actually made into three-dimensional form. And this is charcoal on paper, mounted on board, on plywood. This one's called Conviction, as you can see there. So there's a whole lot of influence coming from John Scott, and also who's the sculptor friend of mine I was telling you about. Because I'm no carpenter, my friends can tell you. But part of the inspiration for the piece of trying to figure out how to make this work is something that I really, really enjoy. I can see it and I can feel it, and so then how do I make it happen? And that process is so important to me, and important, I imagine, to the work itself as well. Here's another one. Sorry, where'd it go? Nope. There we go, went the wrong way. This one is, again, in scale. These are fairly small. They're about 5 feet. And so I generally like to work large because I really want to be enveloped in the piece. I really want the piece to take me over, right? And I'm not a little guy, so I got to make them big, right? And so I really want, that understanding to be a part of it. So like this piece, this is a painting, and this is called Homage to Orisha Oko, who is a Yoruba, somewhat minor Orisha, but his thing is the protection of the crops and the protection of the land. And so I'm not speaking directly to all the time about the land, but in this particular piece I felt that I needed to and I wanted to. And so this is the back of the piece. And what you can see in it, hopefully, is that from this side you can see that the left is oil in the middle. I don't know if you could see that very well. And then from the back you can see that, went too far. On the left side is gold. So it's actually gold leaf. And so it's another metaphor, another symbolic use of those materials. And what I'm hoping that you see with the black and white is with the charcoal, which is the earth, right? And it's the burnt earth for the most part. It's the ashes. And so from those ashes, I want you, and me making something from those ashes, I want you to be able to see and to feel and experience, what happens when we destroy things, right? And charcoal is basically something that's been destroyed, right? And so, and we extract oil, and so the oil on the left side is about that. And so that's what this piece is about. And Orisha Oko, why I chose him is because he's the guardian of the crops and of the land, and he got in a little tiff with his wife, right? It wasn't pretty because she decided then to make him, because he called her something that's out of her name, and she didn't like it. She's more powerful than him, so she made him stay on the earth, and she was able to move around the earth and literally on the land, and she was able to move around and to get into the water and so on and everything. So that was his punishment for calling her something out of her name. So it's kind of an interesting story. This one, it's a little bit out of sequence too, but let me get to this one. In this one too, you can kind of see how I'm using some of these metaphors to literally tell stories. And this next one here is a little bit out of sequence too, because it comes before the other one, but you can see the dance that in this particular piece, right? You can see the movement in it. And that becomes very important to me in terms of understanding how we can make that. This is the story of Apollo and Daphne. So back in the 90s, I kind of got heavily into these sort of stories and mythology and everybody's mythology because I just thought, telling a story, telling a tale is something that really we can understand and communicate better to us than most things. We all love a good story. And so that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed using these to tell my story. Wrong way. Went too far. So you guys know the story of Apollo and Daphne, right? No? Nobody knows that story? Okay, we've got a couple of folks back there raising your hand. But anyway, before we run out of time, I'm going to move on to past that. And I keep pressing the wrong button, Okay, here we go. So these two, this is actually painted on aluminum, and these are actually able to open and close. And so when they're open, this is from our old studio in New Orleans East with John Scott. When they're open, they form something that, like you see here. When they're closed, they actually become 5 separate pieces. Again, the process was so beautiful to understand, try and understand. And the luminosity, and some of the things that, that I'm afraid that we're kind of losing is that the actual physical experience of seeing something in person is quite different from what you see here, right? And the luminosity of the oil paint through the aluminum is just quite remarkable. I was just really intrigued by it. The one big problem with aluminum or any other metal that paint on is like it's heavy. So, and the scale that I wanted to work on, I have a couple of them that, just like a monster to move. I can't move them by myself. These are part of another series that I was working on with aluminum. Altarpieces became important too, so that's where these came from, the idea of making them. This one is called Strange Fruit, and you can see too, inside of this, there are actually little doors that open and close. And those little doors represented for me, little doors and openings that we have inside of ourselves that we all like to keep closed or have someone else open. And so literally I was hoping that people could walk up to them and open them if they wanted to or not, or to actually open the big doors or not, right? And so that's part of it too. So when you open the doors too, you're actually changing the painting. You're actually manipulating the painting to actually change the whole sequence of what you see. So that's part of this as well. This is called Dance, literally called Dance. And you can see the movement in it. You can actually see a second line in this particular piece. And there's a particular, way of dancing that we call second line. And I'm not going to do it, so I did it yesterday. I did a lot of it yesterday. But it's a very beautiful dance. It's actually, it's the greatest form of freedom individually, but collectively working together. So it's such a, because everybody is moving together down the street, but you're doing your own thing as you do it, but you're all doing it together to the same beat, right, to the same rhythm. And that rhythm is somewhat like a heartbeat, that particular beat that we often hear in the second line. So more of these strange pieces where these are actually becoming more sculptural. These look like somebody's fender, right? These are bent and curved. It's hard to see it, but there's literally a curve in this one. This one is from Mahalia Jackson, Flowers for Haley. And oddly enough, my wife's a performer and a playwright, and she wrote a play just before COVID closed us all down, called Flowers for Haley. I was teasing her. I said, "You took my title," but it's not either one of us. It's actually a title for another song that somebody did. And so, and you guys know about Mahalia Jackson being born in New Orleans, right? A very prominent singer with a wonderful story about her life. Mantra. And these are all sort of the form that they're painted on. They're three-dimensional. So I just wanted you to kind of note that. So all of these are that way. It's hard to see. You can see the shadow behind it. And that shadow, they're painted on wood, and the wood is bent and curved by cutting them and folding them like paper, and then gluing them, and clamping them and gluing them, and literally making these sort of shapes that become sculptural, and as another layer to what I'm trying to deal with my meaning. And this one also, too, you can see there's actually a little piece in the middle that's also cut and bent and sliced over and then filled in with another piece of wood. So, you know, the way that I'm thinking about this kind of three-dimensional form, kind of dealing with us. We're three-dimensional, right? And not only that, but we have different ways that we see ourselves and the way that we present ourselves. We present ourselves in different ways to different people. And so that's part of, you know, what I'm trying to do with these. I'll move on. So this is, I did two pieces, one black and white called Fait Accompli, and also a painting of the same title and the same interest. And so that's part of that one. I'm going to go past this one. This one is fairly large. This one is 8 feet tall. And when it's open, it's 8 feet as well. It's 2 doors that open. So it's 4 feet wide when it's closed, and it's 8 feet wide when it's opened. And this one is called In Search of Mother's Garden. And you can see typically the scale of this one a little better. And it's by looking at the shadow and looking at the floor. And again, I want you to be able to feel like you're entering it, right? Here's another one that's sort of bent, and I'm working on these at the same time, right? I'm bending them and folding them and so on, and trying to get another layer of how to make space, right? How to make another layer of meaning in dealing with these kinds of making spaces. So this one is 7 feet. I tried a new material in this one, something called Bendable Plywood. It didn't work too well, but I still have the painting. The Bendable Plywood is all the grain all goes one direction. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with plywood, how it, you know, you layer the wood to make the plies, but you alternate the direction of the grain, right? In bendable plywood, you put the grain all in one direction. So it's like a piece of paper, right? Until you actually stop it from moving in the direction that you want it to, once you get it in place. It's a crazy, crazy material. But it worked for this one, but you know, it just it took so much time to kind of understand how to make that work. And I guess, you know, for young makers, this one also too has this sort of bendable plywood in it. Trying different materials and trying different things. The best way that I know of how to make anything is to fail at it enough times until I can understand how it works, right? And so I've learned that, you know, I can't be afraid to fail because that's the only way I'm going to figure it out. And so I got to screw it up a few times, right? And so that's what happens with a lot of these particular pieces. There's a bunch of them that, you know, didn't make the cut. But the beauty of it is the trying. Let me show you this one as well. Illumination. And so you can see my love of color. It's so funny. I had a show in Houston with this piece, and folks called me a neo-Caribbean artist. I said, what? What does that even mean? You know, because of the bright color. So you know, you don't have control over that either, what people call you. But I can call them and tell them what I think about what they said, but you know, that's about it. I'm going to pass through some of these real quickly. These are, you can see these are smaller, but they're bended and folded as well. So we're getting to the point where we can talk about these later ones. Sure. That one? And you know, you guys, I I guess I should say this, I'm not fond of these kinds of situations where I do all the talking, so if you want to talk, please. If you want to ask questions, please do so. Let me move to, where is it? Okay. So these are those circles again, and these are what these circles are evolving to. So this was an earlier piece about 2010, and this is about 2012. And so you can see how they're evolving into these experiences, right, from those circles. And let me keep going again. This is called For My Fathers. And this is a piece that, again, was a sort of a one that I enjoy because of its scale. Again, you know, I was figured out, you know, well, I said I can't get paper this big, right? And as I thought about it, I said, oh, I can. If I take these pieces and I put them together, right, I can get a bigger piece. And so this one, For My Fathers, was actually made from a piece by Tanya Leon, who is a Cuban cellist. And I really enjoy her work. It's extremely, extremely moving work. And so I made this piece thinking about one of her pieces that was called For My Fathers. And so in thinking about trying to understand who I am, obviously you go back and you go forward. I kind of have come to understand living the philosophy of something that I might call Sankofa, which means it's a proverb that comes from the Yoruba tradition and those particular understandings of the stories that they tell. And this story is about a bird that travels, but it looks backward in order to move forward. But still living in its time, right? And so for me, that's what I feel a lot too, that, you know, I'm trying to understand where I come from, and the only way for me to move forward is to have that understanding. And that understanding is only in the present, right? And so we're only guaranteed being here now, right? We can't do anything about the past, but we can learn from it. In order to go forward, but we are not guaranteed that next day, that moving forward too. So it's a very, I feel, you know, where my traditions from New Orleans, it's very, very important to the way that we live our lives on a daily basis as well. This is a painting, a drawing that I did in a gallery in New Orleans. So once I got the hang of, you know, using this paper, it was over, y'all. These pieces got bigger and bigger, and I got to, what I wanted to do was to, you know, to actually envelop you and to use the space in a way where you become part of the space, right? Because, you know, I always felt that, and the way that I use the way of making space in my experience is that another story that comes from the Chinese philosophers, that we're only, when you think about it, as important as a piece of dirt under your fingernail, right? And so once I understood that and understood my place in this, right, then it became important for me to make this scale, right? So you can see the walls are actually made with paper, and then charcoal is drawn on them. And again, I don't know if you are catching this metaphor about the paper and the charcoal, right? So you can understand. And then I drew on the wall in the back by the window, and that was a bit improvisational as well. So the piece itself is improvisational. So I put the paper on the wall and started drawing, and I wasn't supposed to draw on the back wall. it just kind of hit me while I was working on the other ones, and it said, you know, it needs this backspace, and so I just drew directly onto the wall with charcoal. And obviously that part doesn't exist anymore, but the other two drawings do. So it's 12 feet tall by 24 feet on the right side and 26 feet on the left side. So I really, really enjoyed that one. This is for my father's again. What was interesting about this piece too is we did a performance with it. We used it, actually it's in the collection of the New Orleans Museum of Art. And so we did a performance of it. So literally, a friend of mine who's a cellist came and played the Tanya Leon piece for me. And we also brought in Luther Gray, a drummer. And so he drummed with her. And we also had a series of dancers who actually performed the piece in an improvisational manner. So they looked at the piece and they performed it based on what they saw. So it became sort of a collaboration in that particular event. And a choreographer friend of mine who I teach with sometimes, Barbara Haley, actually choreographed the dancers for this one. So this is fairly recent. This is about 3 years ago. We get into the end, y'all. So just to give you some understanding, this is again, this one is 8 feet. And these are smaller. So this one I think is 7. And these were a couple of them that were in Prospect. This one is also in Prospect. This one is called Harriet's Advice. Another piece that's in Prospect, was in Prospect, I'm sorry. And I'm going to flash through these so that you can get an understanding of them as a whole. And this one's a repeat again, I'm sorry. So again, these are all improvisations. And in my family, I guess, I came to the conclusion after a while, you know, that it's difficult, you know, to do improvisation. And one of my family members, one of my ancestors actually, was a great improvisationalist. And I knew it, but I just didn't deal with it because I'd never met him. His name was Sidney Bechet. And he was he played clarinet, but he became more famous for playing a soprano saxophone. And he was probably as famous as Louis Armstrong, but never came back to the city. He left New Orleans at a young age, like Armstrong did. But unlike Armstrong, who came back to the States, he stayed an expatriate in Paris and in London, and never came back to this country because of things were better where he was in Paris and in England. So that got me thinking too, well, you know, if he can improvise and not use sheet music as a crutch, you know, I can definitely spread some charcoal on the paper and allow that to spread through me. I am out of sequence a little bit here, so bear with me for a second. These two are pieces too that, again, experiments and experiments out of opportunity. I was asked to participate in a show called Guns in the Hands of Artists, and they literally gave us broken up pieces of guns to think about and use and contemplate. And so this piece, it's called Swords to Plowshares, and I used actual palm fronds in this particular piece. And you know, they're very woody, and the front of them look like a plowshare. And so inside of these, though, if you look really closely, you'll see these pieces of guns that poke out at you, right? it's, one of those kinds of experiences that you never want to have, right, when you actually have a gun pointed at you. And so, so that experience of these plowshares consuming these guns that are pointing to you is what that was about. And so I also made this one for that show, which is called Why. And again, you can see guns in it that are poking out toward you. But in this particular year in New Orleans, this is on a piece of wood like I had been forming with the paintings. And on the sides of it are actual coffin handles, old-fashioned coffin handles. And so I was trying to make it look like a coffin lid. And at the bottom down there is actually a tradition that's very southern Louisiana, particularly along the route from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, the French-speaking area of that particular region. It was a tradition when someone died, was that they would make these beaded flowers that would go in front of your house, and that way you would know that there was a wake going on, or that there was someone who had died. And so that became a part of the tradition as well. So that's down there with a year in it. And that, in this particular year, there were, see if I can get it right, 400 and something people that were killed due to gun violence. And so on the map, there's a pin where each one was killed. And then with my left hand, with red paint, I actually wrote their names. So it's, for me, it was a very, very moving piece. This just didn't, it just really blew me away to see that piece. So that's something else too that, and I have, my wife tells me all the time, she says she prefers these pieces than the big drawings and the paintings, but they're really difficult to make. This is another piece that, large-scale piece. This one is 15 feet tall by 20 feet wide. It's charcoal on paper again, and it's, give me a second, I'm getting old, y'all. I forgot the name of it for a second, but the name is really important for me. And it's one that, in terms of the scale and in terms of the improvisation of the scale was really significant. And you can imagine that, I'm tall, but I'm not that tall. And so to work on these, I literally have to, use a ladder and scaffold to get up and down and so on. And so it's a really exciting part of the making process as well, of being able to do that. Fragile is the name of the piece. And thinking about how fragile we are, how fragile everything is around us, that we don't exist forever, and we don't exist in the same way that we exist now forever. And so this is part of the understanding of it. Okay. So this is the piece that at Prospect that I want to come back to you. The painting is not mine. This is just the installation view of one of the rooms at Prospect. So I want you to be able to see, this piece in the way that it's installed. And this is called Harriet's Advice. And unfortunately, you can see that there's a lot of different layers too in this particular one. Some of the things that you can't see, and unfortunately, again, the experience is far greater than actually looking at it in this format. Because there's a lot of these tiny, tiny lines that go across it, and some that go this way. And so they actually make almost like another layer of fence that you can't get behind, but you're intrigued to try and do it anyway. And so there's a lot of that's in this particular piece as well as the other ones. But the part of the improvisation process too has to do with where they're made. In my studio space, there's all sorts of things that happen with the imperfections of the wall that become part of the piece as well. And so that's part of the improvisation that I enjoy. You know, what comes to me is given to me serendipitously, well, you know the word, however it comes, and so I really enjoy that part as well. And I'm going to move on a little bit. This is another installation piece view of the two other works that we saw just a few minutes ago. So why Harriet's advice? Anybody knows what Harriet I might be talking about? Huh? Tubman, Harriet Tubman, yeah. Anybody knows her relationship to who she might be giving advice to? No? It's a tough question, I know, because she lived at a difficult time. She was advising President Lincoln, and her advice to Lincoln was, you know, she said, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, she said, you know, if you're in a room and a snake bites you, right, then you deal with the bite, you know, you deal with it, you do what you have to do to heal the bite. She said, if the snake comes back and bites you again, then you cut its head off, right? And so I thought about that. I said, well, wow, what is she referring to? What does she mean, you know? And I kept thinking about our society today, and what does it mean today? You know, are we still getting snake bit by a lot of things that we haven't decided to really deal with the snake, right? Rather than just the bite of the snake and the symptoms of the bite, right? And so I find it, you know, important for us to maybe start thinking about the snake rather than just the snake's bite. And so it meant a lot for me to kind of think through that and to think about what I do outside of, and what I do with my art making, and also what I do with working with other people and other artists. And so all these things that I do outside of the studio space has to do with that. How do we deal with the snake? And let me get to this other thing here. Oh, there we go, I'm passing it up. These are black mirrors. And so it's another part of the things that my wife likes, right? These are a series of 12. This particular group, I've made these mirrors before, but they were different in that they were silk screened, right? This is actually drawings, and really hard to see because, again, you can't really, the way that they're designed, too, is for you to actually be in front of them because you can see your reflection in them, right? And so it's important for you to see your reflection. And these were actually dedicated to 12 women who have gone under-recognized in New Orleans. And so it came from a thought when my mother died. She was someone who was, I thought, and a lot of people came to me and said that she was very influential in their life. She was actually the first female, and also black, obviously, police officer in the city of New Orleans. And so she also developed what we probably call community policing today. She became a commander in a division that was called Community Relations that she developed. And she literally was working with, she would do with the police department talent shows in the summer with neighborhoods, where she would literally go into the neighborhoods and do that. So anyway, she was very, very important, I thought, and a lot of people did as well. And so in thinking about her, I said, you know, there are all these other women that I know that we don't give them their props, their true understanding of who they are, right? And so I thought that these 12 were women that I should kind of think about. And again, you know, like I like to use metaphor and symbolism, I picked 12 for the first series. And, you know, you guys know about 12, right? Numerology kind of people out there. And then just thinking about 12 in terms of things that we've been taught all of our lives in this Judeo-Christian society, right? We've got 12 what, y'all? 12 disciples, and all of them are men, right? And so I thought it would be appropriate to have 12 women. And I'll do, you know, I'm going to continue thinking about the next 12, but I'm going to think about the next 12 with the community and with the women themselves, the descendants of the women themselves. There are 2 of them in this series that are still living. The rest of them are deceased. So these are Emma Barrett, known as Sweet Emma Barrett. She was a jazz musician who traveled the world, and in a time of all these other jazz musicians that we know about, right? But nobody remembers her and her work. So I thought it was important for that. Inside of there, too, you can see the little drawings, or little portraits of women. They're improvisations. They're not anyone that I knew or recognized or worked from. They're made up. And so I thought, too, they're made up for a reason, because when you look into the mirror, you see yourself, and you see yourself in a black mirror as, anybody knows? You see yourself as black, right? So it's this point of empathy, right? But also these girls, and remember I was talking a little earlier about the Sankofa thought, about, we live in a moment, but we remember our past and we learn from these people. But also, too, it's for the next generation. And so this generation that hasn't come yet. So I couldn't draw someone who I hadn't met yet, right? So they're thinking about our future, our memory for, or thinking through what's going to come and who we're working for. Why am I living now, right? It's for this next generation. So anyway, I'll move past that. Excuse me. And so this is another piece. Those are in a show now, by the way. And then this last piece is called Vanity. And this was done for a show at an artist collective called Antenna. And so we did a show, and the collective decided to do a show based on the theme of sugar. And everybody did, their own thing based on sugar. This is mine. And it's called Vanity, and if you look at it closely, you can barely see what's on the vanity top there. Everybody knows about a vanity, right? But I'm taking the word and using it in another way as well, right? But this is actually made all from sugar. So the vanity itself is made from sugar. And the stool is not, because people had to sit on that, and so I didn't want it to kind of fall apart when it's set on it. So it's actually made out of wood, and it's covered in sugar. There is a black mirror behind it there. And again, the same concept. And in this mirror is my granddaughter. Is a silk screen of my granddaughter. Boy. Let me resume. And there's a bunch of other symbols there. And in my thinking, I'm thinking about sugar in terms of, in Louisiana has a special meaning, just like probably tobacco has a special meaning here, right? Sugar was the reason why Africans were brought here, right? And the labor, the free labor that came from that made this particular area in South Louisiana the richest particular place in the world, literally, okay, because of this commodity. And so that really got me to thinking, about that. And so that's what this is about. On top of the vanity is a sugar, again, but they're made into shackles. And so the jewelry that's on top of this particular vanity is the shackles, and it symbolizes the people that were enslaved to do the labor that made this particular part of the country so extremely wealthy before the Civil War. And so that's what this particular piece is about. It's an installation. There's some parts in it that you can't see, like there are footprints of a little girl in the sugar on the floor. And there's a little picture there that came from a photograph that I got from the congressional, anyway, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the organization, but anyway, that photograph came from a long time ago, and there's a series of them. And what I found intriguing about that is, you know, most of the time we have a picture of our loved ones on our vanity, right? And what was intriguing to me about that was that this particular woman who took care of this little boy, the photographer asked her to actually put the little boy in front of her face. And so she had to be there, but he also had to be there, right? So there was this, just a strange relationship, and there were several photographs like that. Library of Congress, thank you, in the Library of Congress. And so I just found that fascinating, you know, to see that. So this symbiotic relationship, this weirdness about this relationship was part of what we ingrained into this system of making this wealth. So I just found that fascinating. So let's stop here. So I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so I know how you guys must feel. And see if you have any questions. Uh-huh.
I was wondering if your works use the figure more, and it sounded like you stepped away from it eventually.
One more time?
If your earlier works use the figure more, does that matter?
The earlier works that I used the figure in? Yeah, you can see, I didn't intend to do that, but sometimes you do see figures, and sometimes you see them dancing or so on, but it really wasn't intended. I just found it, you know, intriguing and fascinating that, you know, we could, should I turn the lights on? Yeah. That we can actually, you know, experience, because it's all about experience. It's not necessarily about the actual literal figure, right? It's about that experience. And so in my research and my working with it, you know, a figure may come out because of that experience of it, and not necessarily because that's what I'm intending. Does that help? Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for coming and presenting your work. I was really interested in those sort of multi-panel paintings that seem to move, and it seems like you're really sort of enmeshing like the communal aspect of New Orleans and improvisation and jazz and, you know, making of the suits. Do you intend those to be manipulated by the viewer?
Yes.
Or is that something that you might do in the future?
I'm hoping that the viewer would manipulate them. That's the whole intent. Is, you know, I know it's a, you know, we taught very early on, don't touch the art, but, you know, I really want people to actually open the doors and and manipulate the panels, you know, to be moving, and for you to move them around and get in another place. Early on, you saw at the beginning there with the traditions, particularly the Black masking Indians, how they move around. And it's, you know, this does not tell you literally, they use beads that are, you know, seed beads, about the size of a seed that they sow into their, you know, in their songs that they repeat over and over while they're doing this. You know, everybody's got to sow, sow, sow. So that's, you know, part of just to ingrain the idea of work ethic and doing this, you know. And so I wanted that to be a part of this as well, you know, in terms of that manipulation that, you know, when they move in the light. And yesterday was so beautiful. We had this beautiful sunshiny day of 72 degrees. And when the light hits those beads, you know, they move around, right? And so, I wanted that kind of experience in these so that you can move yourself and you can move them, right? If that makes sense. Hi.
I was just wondering how long it took for you to make some of your bigger pieces and
Okay, sure.
the focus and stuff like that.
Well, I teach as well, and so it's based on, you know, I do this every day for an amount of time that I kind of set aside. And so the big piece that you saw, that Harriet's advice, that piece took from the time I learned about what space I had, because it's site-specific to that spot. And it took about a month to actually make that one. And I spent, it was in the summer, I was working on it, so I had a whole lot more time to literally, you know, be running up and down scaffold and ladders to finish that piece. So some of the other ones, it just depends on, you know, how much time I have to actually work on it. And every day I set aside time, you know, to actually be in the studio. Because you guys know who make this stuff. It's all about experience, right? You have to do it. You have to live it in order for it to be anything that's worth your while, right? And so you have to be able to get in there and do it, right? You got to fall on your face a few times. And in my case, one of those pieces there, my wife gets upset with me because she doesn't want me on a ladder anymore because I did fall off the ladder and cracked a rib. And so literally you got to fall sometimes, you know, and get this thing done, you know. So it's a part of it too, you know. It's not just the amount of time, but it's the dedication of the time to making it.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Ron.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for listening.